a lot of sorrowful feelings about the timing, because what's happening now, the rumors that are going about, is that
For years, I kept my mouth shut about that night. I watched documentaries, read books, heard so-called insiders cash in on their version of events. And every time, I felt sick because I was there. I was standing just a few feet away when everything changed for Elvis Presley, and for the rest of us who thought the king was untouchable. People think they know what happened. They point to headlines, autopsy reports, official statements polished by lawyers and managers. They repeat the same phrases. It was his health, or it was bound to happen. But that's not the story I carry when I close my eyes at 3 in the morning. That night wasn't just about a body giving out. It was about a man quietly drowning while the rest of the world applauded. I wasn't family. I wasn't a doctor or some big-shot executive. I was the wall between Elvis and everything trying to grab a piece of him. My job sounded simple. Keep the fans back, keep the crazies out, keep him safe. But after a while, I realized I wasn't just protecting him from strangers. I was trying to protect what little piece he had left from the people inside the walls. By that stage in his life, Elvis couldn't take a breath without somebody counting how much it was worth. Every smile, every wave, every show added up to somebody's paycheck. Folks talk about how lucky we were to be in his inner circle. I watched him pay for every perk with another piece of his soul. That night, people argue about, fans circle it on calendars, writers turn it into chapters. It didn't start with blue lights and sirens. It started quiet, too quiet. The house had that heavy kind of silence that makes you feel like you're trespassing just by breathing. The guys were moving around, phones ringing here and there, but underneath it, there was this pressure in the air, like a storm that hadn't broken yet. Elvis had been different all day, not throwing fits, not playing the star, just distant. He'd smile when somebody walked into the room, crack a joke, and then the second they left, it was like watching a light switch flip off. I'd seen him tired before. This was something else. I'd heard the whispers, same as you, the pills, the late nights, the weight of being Elvis pressing down harder every year. What you don't hear about is the way he tried to hold it together anyway. The way he'd drag himself up, get dressed, and walk out there like his body wasn't screaming at him to stop. People say, well, he made those choices. Maybe, but there were a lot of hands pushing him toward that edge. That night, I was posted close enough to hear the muffled music from the next room, close enough to hear the floorboards creak under his feet, close enough to know something wasn't right, even before the panic started. There's a rhythm to a house, especially one like his. You get used to the sounds, laughter here, a TV on there, footsteps going back and forth. Suddenly, all that rhythm stopped. I checked my watch once, then twice. The minutes felt heavier than they should have. I'd stood outside plenty of doors, waiting for him to say, "Come on in, man," in that lazy drawl of his. But this time, the door stayed shut, and the silence on the other side felt wrong in my bones. You know what hurts the most after all these years? It's not just what I saw when that door finally opened. It's everything I heard afterward. The statements, the spin, the carefully chosen words that made it sound like nobody could have done anything different. Like it was just fate. Maybe that helps some people sleep at night. It never helped me. I remember the moment my hand touched that doorknob. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. Somebody behind me said my name, told me to wait, but I'd already made up my mind. I pushed that door open anyway, and when I saw what was on the other side, I knew nothing about Elvis Presley's life, or my own, would ever be the same again. To really understand what happened that night, you have to wind the tape back a little. Before the sirens, before the silence, before that door ever closed. By then, my days with Elvis all blurred together into this strange mix of glamour and exhaustion. People imagine bodyguards as tough guys in sunglasses, standing in front of screaming fans. Sure, there was plenty of that. But most of my job wasn't standing in front of cameras. It was standing in front of a man everyone wanted something from, and watching the price he paid for being Elvis Presley. From the outside, it looked like a dream. There were cars, crowds, women crying just to touch his sleeve. If Elvis wanted a burger at 3 in the morning, somebody made sure a whole bag of them materialized. If he wanted a song played again, it played again. But what I saw, day after day, was how much he had to give up just to keep all of that going. He could never just walk down a street. He couldn't sit in a diner without the whole place stopping. Every move was surrounded by security, schedules, obligations, and behind every handshake, there was somebody counting how much that moment was worth in ticket sales and merchandise. Inside the house, behind the gates, you'd think it would be peaceful. It wasn't. The phones rang like alarms. Managers, promoters, lawyers, old friends, new faces, every one of them had a favor to ask, a deal to pitch, a show to lock in. I watched him try to be everything to everyone. The star, the boss, the friend, the son, the ex-husband, the father. It was like watching a man trying to keep 10 plates spinning on sticks, while the ground underneath him cracked. The tension in the inner circle didn't show up in the tabloids, but it lived in the corners of the rooms. I'd hear snatches of arguments, money, tours, contracts, TV specials. Some wanted more shows, some wanted better deals. Some just wanted to stay close to the golden goose. They'd lower their voices when I walked in, but not fast enough. I heard plenty. Don't tell him that now, he'll cancel. He doesn't need rest, he needs momentum. We can't afford another missed show. No one said it outright, but I knew what they were really afraid of. Not his health, not his happiness. They were afraid of the day Elvis Presley finally said, "No more." And then there was him, the man I saw when the doors closed and the crowd noise faded. Sometimes he was playful, making jokes, singing old gospel songs like we were just a bunch of kids hanging out. Sometimes he was quiet, staring at nothing, fingers tapping on the armrest like he was hearing music nobody else could hear. Over time, I watched the changes. He moved slower. Getting up from a chair took more effort. His breathing got heavier even when he wasn't doing much. There were pills, everyone knew that part. But what people don't see is how normal it becomes inside the bubble. Just to sleep, just to get through the show, just to calm down. You tell yourself it's under control until one day you realize it's controlling everything. There was one day before that night that still burns in my memory. We were getting ready for a show, the kind of night when thousands of people were already in their seats, waiting for the lights to hit the stage. Elvis was in his room getting dressed, and I was posted nearby like always. He stepped out, took a few steps down the hall, and I watched his face drain of color. His hand reached for the wall. For a second, I thought he was just messing around. Then I saw his eyes. That wasn't a joke. That was pain. "Boss, you okay?" I asked. He forced a little half smile. "Just tired, man." Tired. That word again. I suggested calling a doctor, maybe postponing the show. Someone behind me heard that and rushed in with the same old line. "We can't cancel. People flew in. It'll be fine. He just needs to get warmed up." Elvis straightened his shoulders, like he'd been caught being human, and waved us off. "They paid to see me," he muttered, more to himself than to us. "Let's go." I moved closer to the door, not knocking yet, just listening. My own heartbeat suddenly felt too loud in my ears, like it was drowning out whatever I was trying to hear from the other side. "Elvis," I called out, just loud enough to carry through the wood. No answer. I waited. Tried again. "You all right in there, boss?" Silence. That was the moment the bottom dropped out in my gut. I'd stood guard outside hotel rooms, dressing rooms, back doors, side entrances. I dealt with drunks, stalkers, obsessed fans, angry husbands. None of that scared me like that silence did. One of the others came up behind me. "Give him a minute," he said, but his voice didn't sound convinced either. He probably doesn't want to be bothered. I don't know how long we stood there, arguing with our own instincts. I just know that at some point, the fear got louder than the excuses. I knocked harder. "Elvis, talk to me, man." Nothing. My hand went to the doorknob. In that split second, I thought about every line in the contract, every unspoken rule about privacy, every time I'd been told, "You wait until he calls you." But something inside me screamed that waiting wasn't an option anymore. I turned the knob. The door gave way, slow and reluctant, and my world narrowed down to what was on the other side. I won't go into details that don't need repeating. The tabloids turned his last moments into a sideshow. I won't do that. What I will tell you is this. I knew, the second my eyes found him, that this was not just a fainting spell or a moment of dizziness. This was bad. Worse than anything I'd seen before. I called out his name. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, high and cracking, like it belonged to someone else. People came running. In seconds, the quiet house exploded into chaos. Shouting, feet pounding, phones being grabbed, instructions flying over one another. "Call the doctor. Don't let anyone else in here. We can't let this get out." Even in that moment, with Elvis lying there, barely hanging on, the machine went to work. A story was already being built while we were begging him to respond. Even while someone dialed for help, someone else was thinking about headlines, about what could and couldn't be said. I focused on him, on the man I'd sworn to protect, on the face the world knew, and the vulnerability the world never saw. I kept talking to him, whether he could hear me or not, because it was all I knew to do. And somewhere in that blur, before everything finally went quiet, there was a moment, just one, when he looked at me and spoke words I've never repeated. Those are the words that have haunted me ever since. And those are the words I'm finally ready to share. When people ask me why I stayed silent for so long, I never know where to start. Do I start with the contracts, the fear, the pressure to protect the image? Or do I start with the look in his eyes in those final clear moments? Because that's the part I can't shake. In the middle of the chaos that night, before the shouting, before the frantic rushing around took over completely, there was this small pocket of time that barely anyone noticed. It wasn't dramatic. There were no speeches, no poetic last words meant for the cameras or the history books. It was just me and him, and the weight of everything he'd carried for years. He was struggling. That much was obvious. The strong, larger-than-life figure the world knew looked suddenly fragile, like the man from Tupelo had come back to the surface for a second. The king, The icon, the legend, none of that mattered in that moment. He was just Elvis, a man who'd given too much for too long. I leaned in close, talking to him, begging him to stay with us, telling him help was on the way. I don't even remember half of what I said. My voice was shaking, my hands were shaking, my whole world was shaking. All I remember clearly is the moment his eyes found mine. For a second, everything around us went quiet in my head. The shouting, the footsteps, the panicked voices, they all turned into background noise, because he looked straight at me with a clarity I hadn't seen in a long time. And he said 6 words. "I'm so tired of being Elvis." That was it. No speech, no drama. Just the rawest truth I'd ever heard come out of his mouth. Think about that for a second. A man the world worshipped. A man people lined up to see, cried over, argued about, dressed like. A man who changed music, culture, and history. And in the end, what slipped out of his heart wasn't pride or regret over a missed show or worry about his legacy. It was exhaustion. Not just tired of the tours, not just tired of the late nights and the pills and the cameras. Tired of being Elvis, the product, the myth, the machine everyone expected him to keep feeding, even when it was eating him alive. Those words hit me like a punch to the chest, because I knew exactly what he meant. I'd watched him laugh for people when he didn't feel like laughing. I'd watched him walk on stage while his body was begging him to lie down. I'd watched him nod along while people made decisions about his life like he was a brand instead of a human being. I'm so tired of being Elvis. For years, I kept those words locked up. People asked me what happened that night, what he was like at the end, what he said. I gave them the safe answers, the rehearsed lines. He was tired. He'd been under a lot of pressure. He gave everything to the fans. All true, but not the whole truth. The real truth was uglier and quieter. It was in how alone he felt at the top, how trapped he was inside an image the world had built for him, how hard it was for him to just be a man without someone trying to turn that moment into money. I told myself I was protecting him by keeping that line to myself. I didn't want to see it twisted into headlines or memes, printed on t-shirts, turned into gossip. I imagined it splashed across magazine covers. Elvis hated being Elvis. That wasn't what he meant, and I couldn't stand the thought of people using his pain as entertainment one last time. So I swallowed it. I let the official stories roll out. I watched as people debated the cause of death like it was a puzzle to be solved, instead of a tragedy born from 1,000 ignored cries for help. I listened as they blamed the food, the pills, the entourage, the schedule, even him. But they never blamed the weight of being Elvis Presley. Over the years, that sentence followed me everywhere. I'd hear one of his songs on the radio, and there it was. I'd see his face on a poster, and I'd hear it again. Anytime someone talked about him like he was just a wild rock star who burned out, I wanted to grab them and say, "You don't get it. He wasn't just reckless. He was tired, bone deep, tired." I'm not sharing this now to add to the circus. I'm sharing it because if you really love Elvis, if you're one of the people who still listens to his music, still feels something when his voice comes through the speakers, you deserve to know that behind the legend was a man who carried more than any one person should have to. He wasn't perfect, none of us were, but he was generous. He was funny. He was kind in ways the world never saw. He gave away cars, jewelry, houses, not because he was trying to impress anyone, but because making other people happy gave him a brief break from his own sadness. When he said, "I'm so tired of being Elvis," what I hear now isn't just exhaustion. I hear a plea to be remembered as a human being, not a scandal, as a son, a father, a friend, not just a headline. Maybe speaking up now is my way of standing guard over him one last time. Not with my body, but with the truth. Not the sensational kind, the kind that hurts, but heals. Because if you remember him only for the way he left this world, you miss the miracle of how much he gave it while he was here. If Elvis still means something to you, let it be more than a rumor or a punchline. Comment your favorite Elvis song or memory below, so the man behind the legend lives on through the people who truly cared. And if you want more untold truths, don't forget to subscribe.